Hey there, if you are a consultant, you're going to want to stick around for today's video. I'm talking about how consultants can use publishing in magazines as a way to be able to get their stories out into the world. And so that's part of what I do as an editorial consultant. I help professionals name their expertise and turn them into publishable stories for magazines, for books, and other thought leadership places. Um, and so, why it is it's important for consultants to have some level of editorial direction in how it is that they communicate their work. Number one, it forces you to name your personal framework. What does that mean? Um, for a lot of consultants, they've been doing it so long, they've been doing the thing that they've been consulting on so long, that you know how to just go in and you probably just do the work without even thinking about it. When you need to be able to explain what it is that you do in written form in order to be able to get yourself in front of other audiences, for example, if that's what you would like to be able to do in the new year, you need to be able to name the framework that you are using. And so it forces you to ask, what are the repeatable ideas that I use on a day-to-day basis? What patterns do you see when you're working with your clients? And what is it that you believe that others don't necessarily say out loud? So sitting down to think those things through is actually a really important exercise. If you really want to be seen as a thought leader in your industry, in your line of work, then you're going to have to sit down and name those things so that other people can buy into your vision of what it is that you do. And it will help you to more clearly be able to express what it is that you need to be able to write in your magazine articles. And so the real benefit of naming your framework here is that you stop sounding like every other experienced person on the job, and you'll start to pull away from the crowd, and your expertise, your framework, your vision of how it is that you choose to look at things will actually come to the forefront. So number two, having editorial direction will also sharpen your point of view in general and not just your expertise. Because your expertise alone doesn't get you published, but it's also your personal perspective on how your expertise is changing as the world changes, particularly at this point in time with the advent of things like artificial intelligence or AI, economic changes, just changes in governments and all sorts of things. I don't think that there's any excuse me. I don't think that there's any industry that hasn't been affected by the current changes that are going on in the world. And so it's not enough to just be an expert in what it is that you do. You need to be able to have an overall view, a vision of how it is that your expertise is changing. What is your thought leadership about how it is that your personal view of how your industry is changing as a result? So a few things you want to look for when you are developing your own perspective. Number one is you want to be able to declare what side of the conversation you're on. It might be as basic as having two sides, it might be multiple sides. But you want to be able to name it. You also want to be able to name what it is that you are challenging, or what it is that needs what it is that needs a reframe. Perhaps maybe if you work in the field of, I don't know, of education, and how it is that children are being educated and, using computers or not using computers, or how artificial intelligence is changing the way that homework is being done. Maybe you have a way of reframing, homework assignments when you work in the educational industry. And you want to be able to name that particular perspective. And you want to be able to talk about why your particular lens matters at this moment in time. This is where I really like for people to be able to name, put in their personal experience. Who are you as a person? Where do you come from? What is your cultural background? What has been your experience as a part of your particular gender? What were your experiences growing up? What have been your experiences in maybe in your marriage? Maybe if you are a therapist, and you're talking about marriage therapy, and you have a particular view of how marriage is changing in this point in time. This is the time to be able to bring all that stuff up. So you want to know, you want to bring in your particular lens. Your expertise by itself is wonderful. That's a good foundation, but we also need, these other elements to be able to talk about, why it is that you are memorable. So in the benefit to all of that is that people remember what it is that you actually stand for, as opposed to what it is. It's not like, you're just doing this to be able to pass a test. You're doing this. People become thought leaders because you want to be memorable to people. So, and people will remember who you are and what you stand for. Number 3, having editorial direction will teach you how to translate your expertise and not just explain it. What does it mean to translate? What I find is that a lot of consultants tend to over-explain what it is that they're doing because they're used to having sort of insider conversations with other peers, other colleagues. But when you're talking to people who might be a few steps outside of where it is that you're used to working, an editor will demand that you offer some level of clarity. They want to know why your particular view is relevant. They're going to want to know, and they want you to use language that the general public is going to be able to understand. And so really that's what it means to be able to translate. Can you take what it is that you do on a day-to-day basis, talking to your peers, talking to your colleagues, and can you simplify it? Not dumb it down, but to simplify it in a way that doesn't use a ton of acronyms, general statements that people on the inside, only on the inside would know. A lot of abbreviations, that sort of a thing. You need to be able to step out of your of the language that you use to talk with your peers, and use your language in a way that translates to a general public, still an intelligent public, but to a public who is not necessarily directly familiar with the day-to-day ins and outs of what it is that you do as a consultant in any industry. It doesn't really matter where. So the overall benefit here that we're looking at is you learn how to be able to make complex ideas accessible without watering them down, which is really a good leadership skill to have. Being able to communicate. This is really what communication is about, being able to translate. Communication has to happen, only happens when the other side understands what it is that you are saying. Standing up in front of a group and offering a speech about a topic that no one understands but you, that's not communication. And the same thing goes with when you are writing magazine articles, particularly magazine articles that are meant for the general public. Fourth thing, editorial direction reveals what it is that you have that is actually market ready. So every idea that you have is not always going to belong in a book, a keynote speech, or even a client proposal yet. And so what you want to do, or what having editorial direction is going to help you understand, is which ones of your ideas actually has legs to be able to move people. Which one of those ideas actually catches on with people in real time. It's nice to be able to know, I don't know. It's nice to be able to know, the 200 different ways that, a narcissistic relationship can affect a family. However, what does that mean to an actual family who is experiencing that? And so you want to be able to break that down to be able to figure out how it is that you're going to go out and reach this family and break these ideas down one by one. Which one of these ideas actually spark curiosity, and which insights are ready for an actual public audience? The only way that you're going to be able to know is if you write about them and see how people actually respond. You see, when you write for magazines, you have the benefit of working with an editor. And an editor is always going to be able to say, okay, how is it that when you pitch an article to an editor, working with an editor will give you the benefit of knowing that particular idea works with their readers. So, you're not necessarily guessing. Like if you have your own blog, that certain ideas actually fit, particularly if you're an avid blogger. But when you want to take those ideas to a different public beyond where it is that you've been writing for yourself, that's a different experience. And so having another editor for another magazine who is very much in tune with what their readership is looking for, that's a great experience to have, to be able to know how to be able to communicate your ideas to a different space. And so what happens is that you can stop guessing and you can start testing your ideas on a real world audience. And lastly, editorial direction actually turns your ideas into assets and not just general opinion. A published article is more than just visibility. It's IP that can be used elsewhere. And so your ideas become proof of your authority. I always talk about how when I wrote magazine articles for Essence magazine, and I've been a writer for, I don't know, more than 20 years. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything to my personal family members who don't know what I do on a day-to-day basis. They don't know that they didn't understand that I was working in education for a couple of decades, really. They don't understand how my experience as a writer and how my writing for my work, and then I had personal projects that I was always doing in writing that led to me being hired to be to teach classes, full-length classes in Washington D.C. and was able to do some consulting work with community organizations and nonprofits and workforce development organizations and things like that. did all sorts of things. Worked with international development organizations. Traveled to countries in West Africa, and all sorts of projects working with women, just shea butter cooperatives and all sorts of things. But no one has ever really gotten excited about any of the work I had done until I'd written 2 art magazine articles for Essence magazine. And the reason is because as a Black woman, Essence magazine is known and understood across several generations of Black women in my family, and so it stood in we placed this magazine in high regard when there were no other magazines that were available that talked about the experience of Black women. Essence magazine was there, and so for me to be able to get my ideas, my stories about particularly my journey as I travel around the world for the last 7 years, and how different that experience is from living in the United States. Then it was like I was finally seen. It was like I was finally seen. They're like, "Oh, Halana, she's the writer in the family," and I'm like, "Oh, all right, well, I've been doing that." And that's kind of like what it is with you and your work and your consulting work and your training work, and the things that you teach. People don't really understand what it is that you do until you're able to borrow the authority of another magazine. So if you work with higher education organizations, you might want to write for a Chronicle of Higher Education. If you do something related to families, you might want to write for Parents magazine. I just got an article. I'm not even a parent, but I just got an article that was published in parents.com, and they signed me up as an ongoing writer for articles on a month-to-month basis, and so that's really exciting. So I actually wrote about the experience of being an aunt, and have borrowed the experiences of other people, have interviewed other people who parents who were talking about their experiences with working, coordinating with their brothers and sisters / aunts and uncles, and trying to raise their children. So if you're a therapist, if you're a teacher, if you are a parent, working for parents, writing articles for Parents magazine might be a good look for you. But you need to be able to have a point of view to be able to share that. You need to be able to find not just the big stories of what it is that you do, but also the smaller incidences, I would say, the smaller incidences that you can talk about in your life, or just trends in other people's lives in general. It doesn't always have to be your own personal story, because in a lot of these stories they ask you to interview other people to be able to get their side of the story, right? And so when you do that, you start to learn how to find the story of what's going on around you. It's not just you and your big framework only, but you'll be able to find and sort of navigate these tiny stories that are going on in the background of your own life, as well as find common scenarios of other people who are living the same thing. And so the benefit of all that is that your thinking compounds instead of disappearing after each client call, because you are always collecting these new stories as you go around. And so a lot of this stuff when you write these stories, in addition, it becomes a foundation for a lot of maybe the workshops that you create. Maybe you do talks somewhere, excuse me, or the books that you want to be able to write, the books, the ebooks, the blog posts, the Substack newsletter. All of that matters. All of that matters. All of that works when you have a good editorial direction. And so this is really why I teach pitching magazines, not necessarily as a one-off writing exercise, but as a way to be able to clarify your thinking. How do you think, and how do you position your expertise for a public audience? And so a couple of things. I teach a pitching magazines course that's coming up on February 22nd, 2026. I'm going to put a link. I have one link there. It's a link tree, and you'll be able to see the pitching magazines class. You can click on that, and you can learn more information about that. But generally, it's an 8-week course. It's a group course, and I am capping it at 10 people right now. I have 2. We are at the tail end of January, so we still have some weeks. But I would really love to be able to have a group of people who are interested in practicing this skill. I have taught this class a few times as a 2-hour workshop. And what I realize is that learning how to pitch, particularly for people who who don't consider themselves writers on a day-to-day basis, they're great at whatever it is they do. The thing that you know how to do, you can do it. But learning how to be able to write it, to take what it is that you do on a day-to-day basis and break that down into a pitchable story that can be picked up by a popular magazine. Not always an industry-related magazine, although you can do that too. It's still the same skill, but popular magazines. That's a separate skill that needs to be developed, and it benefits you in multiple ways. It benefits you if you're doing keynote speaking. It benefits you if you're a trainer or teacher in some kind of a way. It benefits you if you want to be able to write books. So this is a skill that you'll be able to use for many, many years to come in your career. So that's an 8-week pitching course. You can click the link if you're interested in that. If you also just want to stay connected to what it is that I'm doing as an editorial consultant, I have a freebie also that's available at that same link. It's called 5 Successful Magazine Pitches. And it offers you proof of it just shows you what 5 pitches that I have sent out. These are my personal pitches that I share with you. I offer you the pitch, the pitches, and underneath it has a link that you can click on. And it'll bring you to the actual published story. So you can see the difference between what the pitch looks like and what the actual published article looks like, which is good to have. So you'll be able to see some of the things that I personally have put out into the world. And then there's other stuff on there in general about what it is that I do as an editorial consultant. And so as an editorial consultant, if I haven't explained that ad nauseum already, is I help people take their thought leadership, the way that they think about the world, and I help them turn that into stories that other people would be interested in consuming. So that could be for a book or a magazine article in general, but it can also be used for things like, keynote speeches and other things. So yeah, if you have any questions that I can answer, or if if you have suggestions for other things that I could talk about in another video or in tomorrow's video, I would love to be able to have that. Just put your name and your question or your video idea in the comments. What else? You can like this video. Click like, just so I can see the number of people who are watching these videos. Share this video with another writer, with another thought leader, with another person who'd be interested in getting their message out into the world. And subscribe to the channel if you'd like to be able to keep up with what it is that I'm doing here. So again, my name's Halana Black, and I will see you tomorrow. Peace.